G'day, and welcome to the Sea Creatures podcast, a show all about the amazing animals that live beneath the waves. Each episode, we chat about a specific sea creature with a guest who has spent time and interacted with this ocean animal. Our guests range from marine biologists to divers to underwater photographers, citizen scientists, and people that have an intense passion for marine life. My name's Matt Testoni, and I'm all of the above. And joining me for this episode of the Sea Creatures podcast is Andrew Trevor Jones, and he's a marine biologist and underwater photographer. And we're going to be talking all about the Sydney Pygmy Pipehorse. Welcome to the show.
G'day.
So, Sydney Pygmy Pipehorse. I was talking to a friend, and they were like, you have to talk to Andrew about the Sydney Pygmy Pipehorse. So, how have you become so synonymous with this animal, and why do you love them so much?
I guess I've just been tracking them for it seems like 9 years now. I saw my first one in 2011, and in fact, I really didn't know much about them. I was on a night dive with a buddy. He stumbled on one, and I sort of saw it and immediately remembered reading about it in a book and thought, This is the Pygmy Pipehorse. I've always wanted to see one. And we were so wrapped that at the end of the dive, it was really rough and we got washed up on the rocks and we didn't care. It was just like our cameras nearly got smashed, but we were just so thrilled to seeing this beautiful little creature. They're only small. The largest they get to is about 55 millimeters long, and that's including their tail. And maybe I should take a step back and explain what they are so that you can understand sort of the size things. So basically, it's called a Pygmy Pipehorse, and it's more or less a cross between a seahorse and a pipefish. So most people would be familiar with a seahorse, has a horse-type head, and they normally orient themselves in a vertical position. So they wrap their prehensile tail around some kind of substrate, might be a sponge, and they're sort of sitting upright with their nose sort of pointing down at an angle. And then you may also be familiar with pipefish, which really just looks like a pipe, and they orient themselves horizontally. These guys have some of the characteristics of a seahorse, so they have a head that looks much like a seahorse, but they orient themselves horizontally like a pipefish. They have a prehensile tail like a seahorse, so they can wrap their tail around sponges and other things in the substrate. And they're a little bit like more elongated like a pipefish, but they still have this seahorse sort of look to them. In fact, one of the first ones that it was ever sighted, a diver had found one in Jervis Bay, and he sent a photograph to Rudy Kuda thinking that he'd found some kind of juvenile seahorse because it does look like a seahorse. But it turns out it was a Pygmy Pipehorse. And at the time, Rudy had never seen one before. He assumed it was an existing species, and it wasn't until a few years later that a specimen was collected and taken to the Australian Museum. And once Rudy saw it, he knew it was a new species and then set about describing it. And that all happened in the 90s. This fish was only actually described, so basically it was new to science until 2004. Well, I guess they've been known for longer because people had seen them, but it wasn't officially named until 2004. So I saw my first one. As I said, it was very small, 55 millimeters in length. This one was white, and they come in all sorts of colors, pinks, pale yellows, even greeny colors. In fact, I saw my first lilac one this year. I went for a dive on my birthday and saw a lilac one. Unfortunately, I never saw that one again, but we have seen another lilac one since then, and it's still around. Yeah, I saw my first one in 2011, and then it wasn't until about 2013 that I saw my next one, and that was a buddy had found some. We were diving and we found some small, diving at Bear Island in Botany Bay, and she found one, and then she found another one, and then I found one, but it still sort of didn't count as me finding one. And then over the next year or so, various people would show them to me, or they would tell me where they were, and I'd go and find them, which was exciting. And then it was in late 2014, I was diving on my own, and I thought, I'm going to look at this rock and see if I can find a Pygmy Pipehorse, and I did. And it was probably one of the most thrilling moments of my life, because I'd found it 100% on my own. No one had told me where it was, no one had pointed it out to me, and there it was, this beautiful pink female Pygmy Pipehorse, and it was all my own. And then I saw it probably for another month or so on that same rock. And then from that point on, I sort of had my eye in, my brain now knew exactly what they looked like. And I'd probably say I'd seen thousands of them since then. My record was 25 on one dive, but I just love finding them. I know other people that sort of became good at finding them and they sort of lost interest in them. but I've just never lost interest in them. It's just incredible to watch, incredible to find. They're usually in pairs. So if I do happen to find one, I'll usually look around for a second one. The sexes are fairly easy to tell apart. And another interesting fact about pygmy pipe horses is the males have a pouch like a seahorse and they carry the egg. And so that's basically how you tell them apart. The abdomen is a slightly different shape because that's where the pouch is. So on a male, the abdomen's more elongated and it's a more subtle transition from the abdomen to the tail. Whereas in the female, it's almost a sharp angle. So the abdomen curves around and then there's a right angle and then there's the tail. If I'm diving and I find one, I work out whether it's a male or female and then I look for the other sex because they're usually in pairs. Sometimes I'll be diving and I'll find a male. I think, oh, cool, I'll look for the female. And then I'll find another male. I'm going, all right, I've got two females to find. Sometimes you find them, sometimes you don't. They're very cryptic. Even some of the brightly coloured ones can be difficult to find. I will often see the same individuals on the same rock week after week after week, sometimes as long as 6 months. I know there was a pair at Bear Island that people were seeing on a regular basis that were there for over a year. The problem is sometimes I can go to a rock that I know there were two on and I can look for 10 minutes and not find them. Come back a day later and find them both immediately. So they're that good at hiding that even if you know they're there, you may not be able to find them. So you can imagine the difficulty in finding something that you don't even know is there. So, you can only spend so much time on each rock looking for them.
Yeah, so we've got these like amazingly beautiful little animals. And one of the reasons they blend in so well is because they are covered in these beautiful little appendages. And it has been reported, but no one has really confirmed that they also get algae on them.
I can't say for certain whether it's algae growing on them or it's actually part of the animal, but it does look a lot like the algae that they live in. So it is possible that they're somehow growing the algae on them, or it may just be really fantastic camouflage that enables them to, maybe from the food that they're eating or something else in the environment that allows them to mimic the environment in which they live. Interestingly enough, they typically live on sponges. I've seen them in bryozoan, in hydroid colonies, and sometimes in algae, but usually not all that often in algae, although it does look like algae. So, for example, the bryozoa that they often live in does look like algae. But yeah, I think probably the jury's out. Someone maybe need to do a study to determine whether these appendages are in fact part of the animal or somehow they're able to grow it.
Yeah, one of the mysteries of the sea, I guess. Like they are such a new animal, having been described only 23 years ago in a capital city where they live is crazy.
Well, it's not even 23, it's only 16 years ago, 2004. So yeah, so they were the description was based on a specimen collected in 97. But yeah, the actual official description only came out 16 years ago. And really, there's not a lot of work that's been done. And unfortunately, that's because this just isn't funding to do these sorts of things.
That would be a cool research project, Pygmy Pipehorse.
Oh, it would be, yeah. Although, how do you collect? I guess you could just catch the animal and snip off bits. But ideally, you'd want to have the animal. So what you want to do is take a DNA sample of the animal itself and a DNA sample of the appendages, and then compare the two. And if it's the same DNA, then it's part of the animal.
Yeah, that would be quite interesting. So yeah, we mentioned before they come in all these different colors, and you said they're lilac. Do the colors always match where they're living? And do you think that's kind of how they change them, or do you think it's due to their diet?
That's something that I've often contemplated and I don't know the answer to. I've often seen a pair that have lived together for weeks and weeks, and one is bright pink or red and the other is a more cryptic colour, like a brown colour that matches the surrounding. So one of them stands out and one of them doesn't. Sometimes both of them stand out, so you might get two white ones together, or you might get two cryptic ones together. And there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason as to why they would do that. There's a soft coral that you find around Sydney. I'm not sure whether you get it down in Melbourne as well. It's called Carajoa, and it's basically a soft coral that lives in a symbiosis with a sponge. So the trunk and the branches, if you like, of the soft coral are orange. It's because it's covered with this orange sponge. But the polyps themselves are white, like really, really vivid white. And you often find white pygmies in these soft corals. And so being white and with the soft coral being white, perhaps it helps to camouflage them. But then I've seen cryptic ones in the same soft corals, so it didn't help. And I've also seen ones that were white over a number of weeks go to a very, very pale colour, and I've seen ones that are very, very pale colour go to white over a number of weeks. So again, why would you be changing colour if you've got something that's suiting it. So it may be just diet related. Ones that eat a certain food go white, and ones that eat another food go lilac, and others go pink. I don't know. It's weird.
So what do they eat?
So like most cygnathids, so cygnathid is the family seahorses, pipefish, sea dragons, and these pygmy pipehorses belong to, and they mostly eat small crustaceans. Crustaceans are like tiny shrimp. It's a particular type of shrimp called a mysid, which is the most common food eaten by most cygnathids. If you look at the snout of a pipefish or a seahorse, one of these pygmy pipehorses, pipefish, it's like a tube and it's rigid. So it's not like most other fish have a more flexible mouth. They have this very, very rigid jaw with a flap on the end, which is their mouth. And they basically feed by sucking up the crustaceans. And I've actually watched these guys feed, and I'll be taking photographs. So the flash will be strobing away, and they're just busy, eating their food. They don't seem to be too worried about it. And you basically just see this slurping sort of action as they're feeding. Sea dragons do the same thing. Seahorses do the same thing. Pipefish would do the same thing, but it's harder to see because their mouths are even smaller. It basically is like hoovering up these crustaceans. And it's amazing how accurate they are, because you see them just swimming along and you can see the mysid in front of them, and they just move in and slurp it up.
Yeah,
really cool
just like a sea dragon, I guess. Because they do.
Yeah, exactly.
Look like a mixture of a seahorse and a sea dragon.
Yep.
So they've got their camouflage. Now that camouflage, it's to protect them from predators, or it's to allow them to sneak into groups of mysid shrimp and eat them up?
It'd be to protect them from predators. I mean, certainly watching sea dragons feed, and as you said, these are much the same. The mysids are just there, and the dragons come in and feed on them. It's pretty obvious that there's a dragon there. I don't think the mysids can escape. It'd be the same with these guys too. Any small crustaceans that are there are just going to be there for the taking. They're not going to really be able to escape. It's so that they don't get eaten by predators, and we don't know what the predators are. A friend of mine, a buddy, we were diving together. I just pointed out a pygmy pipehorse. I moved on. He was photographing it, and while he was photographing it, a big blue groper came in and slurped it up.
Wow.
Whether that's a normal diet of a blue groper, or whether it's just blue gropers follow divers around and eat anything that they think that the diver's interested in, I'd probably say it's more likely the latter, but there must be something that feeds on them. I can't imagine that they would go without some kind of predator.
Yeah, something kind of having a nibble. And I guess, blue gropers are such a opportunistic feeder, I feel like they would just eat anything and everything.
Yeah. And particularly in areas that are heavily dived, because you'll get dive guides that are cutting up sea urchins and things, so they know to follow divers around and they're likely to get something to eat.
So what's the coolest thing you've seen pygmy pipehorse doing, or what's the craziest kind of dive or you've had with them?
I've yet to see any spawning. I've seen them getting ready to spawn. So basically they mate in the water column. So I've seen video of it, and friends have seen this happen. So basically they will usually swim together when they're ready to breed, maybe latch their tails together, and then they float up into the water column. So they may be 5-10 centimeters away from the substrate, from the rock that they were on. And then the female will insert her ovipositor, which is basically her egg-laying tube, into the male's pouch, and then lay the eggs in there, and he fertilizes them as they go in. So I've not actually seen that. I have seen them getting ready for it, so the two of them are together. At one point I was diving, I saw them getting ready. I sort of, should I stay? Should I go? I left. I came back and they were gone. And I suspect that they'd gone up into the water column, they'd mated, and then the surge had taken them to another rock. So it wasn't like they died or anything, but they just
swept off in the course of love.
But what probably a really cool thing I saw, it may have been in preparation for spawning, or it may simply have been part of their courtship ritual. Very surgy day, so there's a lot of water movement. Current was quite strong. I found a male. In fact, it was a male I'd seen before, and he was sitting on a just attached to a bit of algae. And I then looked for the female. I spotted her about 20 centimeters away and thought, oh, cool, because I as I said, I'd seen this male multiple times before. I hadn't seen the female. Oh, finally saw the female. Just as I spotted her, she let go of where she was, floated up into the water column. And as I said, surge going one direction, current going the other direction. She floated right down and hung on to the exact same piece of algae or alga that the male was on. I don't know how she did it, because I can't even move myself that well underwater. But she obviously just knew how to time herself with the surge and the current, and she landed right on top of him. And it was just unreal. Wow. Really just unbelievable to see.
Because they're not great swimmers, are they? Because how do they
No.
swim normally? Do they have fins
They've
like a seahorse?
Yeah, they've got, basically it's like a seahorse. So if you ever seen a seahorse swim or a sea dragon swim, they're not really, they're not Shane Gould or any other, famous swimmer. They've got pectoral fins. I think they do mostly swim with the pectoral and the dorsal fin, but it's more they can maneuver with it. It's not actual swimming as such.
Yeah.
So I don't know how, and I guess they can probably also control their buoyancy because the way she went up, across, and then down, so she obviously has some way of controlling her buoyancy, but it was just incredible to watch the precision in which she was able to land on top of the male, and then they were together. There was another time I was pretty sure that a male was about to give birth. His pouch was very, very inflated. It was open at the front, and I managed to get some photos sort of showing into the pouch, and I waited for like 15, 20 minutes and nothing happened. So I don't know how long I'd have to wait. I mean, I did that with a seahorse once. So it was a seahorse I'd seen who had got more and more and more pregnant. And then one day I thought, this is the day he's going to do it. And I waited for 20 minutes and nothing happened. And I was sort of at the start of a long dive. I didn't have time to wait. I went back the next day. He hadn't given birth, so I didn't miss anything.
Oh, and I guess that's the thing. You're only down there as a scuba diver for like an hour max, really, usually, or 2 hours, depending on, what your kind of setup is. And these creatures, it can happen anytime within days or at nighttime or morning, or you got to be lucky. You got to be lucky.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, not a pygmy seahorse story, but a sea dragon story. One of my regular sea dragons that I see at one of my dive sites. I did a dive on the way out. So it's basically you get in at one spot, you swim out, you swim back and get out at the same spot. And he was near the entrance. So I saw him there. He had no eggs. I thought, I'll teardrop, he must be due for some eggs soon, but he doesn't have them now.
Yeah.
Swam away, came back 80 minutes later, he had eggs.
Oh, no.
There was no female to be seen when I saw him before. There was no female around after. So somehow in that 80-minute period that I'd been gone, a female had come up, they'd done their courtship, she transferred the eggs, and I'm thinking, all of those wonderful things that I saw in those 80 minutes, I would have given up gladly to watch that.
Yeah, but what can you do? Sit and watch a seahorse for all that time. I'll post a link in the description of the podcast for the mating, because I did watch the video as well of the mating pygmy pipehorse, and it is amazingly like a seahorse.
Yeah, well, it's I think this is the one on the Australian Museum website, and that's Nick Missedon. Nick was actually one of the, I mentioned that people kept showing me pygmy pipe horses when I couldn't find them myself. Nick was one of the people that was showing me them at Bear Island, and it was amazing. He'd show me, and I was just like, how could you find them? And I just, it blew my mind that people could find them. And now I don't even, how could you not find them?
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to come up for a dive with you, I think.
Certainly come up. I mean, as I said, I've seen up to 25 on one dive. In fact, it was a dive I did with Matt Smith, but in fact, it's very rare now that I will do a dive at Kurnell where I don't see one. And I think I went for well over 12 months at Bear Island where I saw one on every single dive. And then there was one dive where I didn't see one, but that's because I dived on the east side of the island rather than on the west side of the island. Once you know where they are or how to find them, they're reasonably easy to find. I won't say that they're super easy. I mean, there was a period in late last year at one of my dive sites where I didn't see any for like 3 or 4 dives.
Yeah.
And then I found one, and then I found another, and then it was, that run of bad luck was broken, and I see them every time now.
So if you're going down to a dive site in Sydney or a bit south or a bit north, and you want to find one of these amazing little sea creatures, what are some kind of hints, and what would you do as a diver?
Okay, so the places you can see them in Sydney, I think Kurnell is better than Bear Island for finding them, but both Bear Island and Kurnell, you can see them at all 3 of the main sites at Kurnell. You can see them at Shell Harbour, which is sort of down past Wollongong, and also Jervis Bay, and that was where the first one was seen, was in Jervis Bay. Probably, really the best advice would be to go with someone that knows how to find them, because if you've not seen them before, you've sort of got 2 problems. One, where do you look? Because they can be up pretty much on any rock, but it's a matter of how you look for them. Your brain doesn't know what they look like, so it's actually quite difficult to see. And that was the problem I had for 2 or 3 years after I'd seen my first one, before I actually found one for myself, is I hadn't trained my eyes and my brain to what they look like. But because people kept showing them to me, that pattern matching then sort of got better and better in my brain. And so now I can sometimes just see the tail. So if you imagine if this thing is 55 millimeters long, so you can imagine how small the tail is. I've spotted just the tail wrapped around something from a weird angle, and I've gone, I recognize that. That's the tail of a pygmy pipehorse. And I've sort of moved around the rock. The rest of the pygmy pipehorse has shown up. But that's pattern matching. So if you get used to seeing something often enough, you can see it easily. It's the same as like when you see a friend on the street. There's hundreds and hundreds of faces, but because your brain remembers what someone looks like, their face sort of stands out from the crowd. I think it's the same thing. And there's a lot of marine creatures you can find the same pattern happening. Once you get used to seeing what they look like, no matter how good their camouflage is, for them the camouflage falls down because you now have a picture in your mind of what they look like, and you can sort of peel away all the bits of the camouflage and see them for what they are.
Yeah.
So sometimes it'll be the eye, it'll be the tail, it'll be the general movement. So another thing you can look for, particularly if there's a small amount of surge, they tend to move out of sync with the surge. So if there's bryozoa or algae, and it will sort of, the surge will go one way and all the algae goes like that. And then just before it moves back, then you'll see there's something else move, like sort of late. And then it goes back the other way, and then there's something else that moves back late. And so that's another way of seeing them. But again, if you don't have your eye in, if you've not seen them before, it can be really difficult to spot them.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of leafy scorpion fish in a way. Like if you ever see them, they look like a leaf. And often how I've spotted them is because there is a bit of surge, or a bit of movement, and then the movement will stop. But the fish will keep moving like it is, pretending that there is a current. And you're like, I caught ya. So it kind of sounds like they're doing the same thing.
Yep, it is. Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. And again, I've often pointed pygmy pipehorses out to people, and people have gone, I have no idea what you're pointing at. And then you keep pointing and you keep pointing, or they get a different angle, and all of a sudden something clicks and they can then see it, and then they can't not see it. But yes, the leaf scorpion fish is a perfect example. And red Indian fish, I don't know whether you've seen red Indian fish. Yeah. They will do the same thing. They do that swaying motion, and it gives them away. They're doing their best to look like algae or something else, and it sort of falls down.
Yeah, I just love the idea that a fish is swimming along, and even though there's no surge or no movement, it looks at a red Indian fish or a pygmy pipehorse that's moving and goes, oh yeah, there's a bit of current today. They don't have that mental capacity to know that there is no surge, that shouldn't be moving. So I just think it's a funny image to have.
I went to South Australia 3 years ago, but there's southern pygmy pipehorse. So this one's the Sydney Pygmy Pipehorse, the southern pygmy pipehorse, which is in the same genus as this one and was described a lot longer ago. And I was hoping to try and look for those at Rapid Bay, but unfortunately the conditions weren't any good and we couldn't dive there. And one day I'll go back there and I'll see if I can find them. Because if I can find these guys, I can find the other ones.
Yeah, it's all getting the eye in. Are they the same? Yeah. Like, do they look very similar, or are they quite distinctly different?
Yeah, they do look. They're probably a little bit more elongated, but the same basic shape. So the head shape's the same. They orient themselves horizontally. They're probably abdomen's just not as deep. Yeah, look fairly similar. And I would expect them to behave in a similar way. So yes, I was a bit bummed out that we didn't get to dive at Rapid Bay, because someone had told me that they're between the old jetty and the new jetty, and I thought, I'll go there. If anyone's going to find them, I'm going to find them. But no, we never got to look.
The Pipehorse Whisperer, you'll have to return.
Yes, one day.
Well, that kind of brings us to the end of the episode. Thanks very much for being on. And if anyone wants to see any of your photos or anything like that, where should they go and what should they do?
I have a Instagram handle, I guess you call it, just under my name. So if you just basically search for Andrew Trevor Jones, you can find me there. Probably if you Google Andrew Trevor Jones, you'll come up with, I've got my own website. Unfortunately, I don't keep it updated much. I'm too busy diving to keep the website updated. And I'm also on Facebook under my name. So I'm not sort of hiding behind a pseudonym or anything like that. So if you just search on any of the platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or just Google for my name, Andrew Trevor -Jones, you'll see me there and you'll see my photos.
Yeah, some of the amazing, and I encourage everyone to look at what a pygmy pipe horse and some of your photos look like, because they're amazing animals and they're amazing photos. Sea Creatures Podcast is hosted, produced, and edited by myself, Matt Testoni. You can see more of my photography on Instagram, Matt_Testoni_photography, and my webpage, mtunderwatermedia.com. If you've liked the podcast, please subscribe, leave a review, and visit our Patreon account, patreon.com/seacreaturespodcast, where you can help subsidize the running of the show. Production assistance by Georgia McGrath, and music by Dan Musil and his fantastic slide guitar. Tune in next time to hear all about grainer sharks, which aren't dangerous, with underwater photographer Karen Green. This has been the Sea Creatures Podcast. Over and out.